James Hagens starts the season as the number one ranked prospect for the 2025 NHL Draft at McKeen's Hockey, but our scouts say his hold on the position is slipping. Forwards Porter Martone and Michael Misa are making waves in the OHL, putting up unprecedented numbers for their respective clubs. And fellow OHLer Matthew Schaefer has done nothing to relinquish his spot as the top defenseman in this year's class. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Kyle Watson, and I'm happy to announce I'll be hosting the McKeen'S Hockey Show on YouTube this season. On this show, I'll be joined by our team of scouts and analysts at McKeen'S to provide you coverage of the draft and all major events in the junior hockey calendar. Today, I'm joined by Assistant Director of Scouting and Senior West Regional Scout Derek Neumeier to break down our preliminary rankings and examine the race for first overall.
Hagens starts out the year as number one. That was what was expected heading into the year. What's he done to maintain that place?
Well, it's the consistency, right? I mean, he was fantastic all of last year for the national team development program, was great against college competition, great against the USHL competition, was great, if not outright fantastic at international events. And he's made that transition to the NCAA pretty seamlessly. I mean, he's scoring at well over a point per game pace. He's, still playing to his strengths. He's, giving up some size and some strength and some conditioning going up against older competition at that level, but he doesn't look outmatched by it. I mean, he looks really comfortable. He looks right at home. There's still a little bit of adjustment going on. He's not quite as dynamic or dominant as he has been at other levels, but he's certainly on track to get there. Like, he's already one of the better players in college hockey. He's still very much the same player he was last year for all the right reasons. His game is still trending in the right direction for all the right reasons. So it's more so just him kind of maintaining his top spot right now while making the progress that I think scouts wanted to see him make. He's still a very fantastic skater. He's still a dynamic playmaker. We're still seeing the high-end hockey sense. We're still seeing all the things that make him a projected first-line center at the NHL level. I mean, that's the best-case scenario for him. And so far at this level in college hockey, we haven't seen anything that might shake scouts' perception of him eventually reaching that kind of status at the NHL level.
With Hagens, one thing I've been reading into him is that his game at this point is quite well rounded, and that in terms of consistency night in, night out, not a problem whatsoever. It's maybe rare, but I think there are some first overall picks or projected first overall picks entering the year that are just loaded with talent, and it's about putting the game together. But it seems like he's pretty far along in his development in that regard. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's just a certain maturity to his game, you could call it a professionalism with Hagens that's really impressive. He just seems kind of like a natural with hockey. His understanding of the play and the situations, shift to shift, game to game, it's all very high end and consistently high end. He never seems like a player who's lost or, is struggling to catch up with the play or struggling to make reads at speed. Like, there's just so much that's polished about his game already, and he keeps refining it as well. You do see that sometimes with some very talented players. They have very clear weaknesses that they're working on. You kind of have to project that they're going to improve those things over time. With Hagens, he's kind of already there. Like, everything about his game is already very, very polished. I don't think there's any real red flags to anything that he does or the way that he plays. I think he's a very, very polished player for his age. He's a little bit older for this draft class. It's worth mentioning. He's an '06 birthday, not an '07. But yeah, there's just something very special about how well-rounded and advanced his game is for his age.
Now, Hagens is obviously playing in college, and these other players we're about to talk about are playing in junior, so they didn't have to worry about adjusting to a different level of play. But I would say with the people in contention to challenge Hagens for first overall, it's not a case that Hagens has slipped, like we just say, like we've said, but more so these names are heating up. So Michael Misa to start has put together one of the best starts to an OHL season I've witnessed. Period, not just among draft eligibles. As of this recording, he leads the Canadian Hockey League with 18 goals in 15 games. In his first 14 games, he had a point in every game. So that's where he picked up all 28 of his points so far. I want to start this dialogue by turning the clock back a bit to the start of the season. From what I saw, the narrative surrounding Misa was that he had been great, but not necessarily excellent or exceptional in Saginaw. And more than
Mhm.
likely than not, he would not be challenging Hagens. Am I describing that accurately?
Coming into the season, yeah, I would say that was more of the general industry consensus about him coming in. Yeah.
But like I said, he started out incredibly, and for me, it seems like a case of, the flashes were there, and it's cliche or it happens every year, but really, he's just taken the ice time, he's taken the increased role, he's taken the position change to center and run with it, and he's had some good line mates. Christian Epperson has looked excellent and been a really good foil for him, but. Yeah, I think we're just kind of seeing Michael Misa and what was expected of Michael Misa at this point come out now. And I think that, his trajectory might be a little bit rewritten now, and people are kind of going to look back on his first two seasons more fondly when you recognize that it was always there. I think he was just dedicated to winning and helping Saginaw get where they needed to be, and not necessarily his own game or his own highlight reel.
Yeah, I mean, everything's really coming together well for Misa. As a scout, it's always exciting when you see a player that looks more comfortable at center than on the wing, which I do think is the case with Misa. I think he's just more comfortable playing down the middle, and that has been part of his success so far. I think he also needed a little bit more time to physically develop. He looks a little bit bigger. He's a little bit more better conditioned now than he was before. Some of that has kind of caught up to the skill in a way that it hadn't previously. And I think that's a huge part of it as well. So, yeah, I mean, you've got a guy who thinks the game at an exceptionally high level, very smooth and naturally agile skater, a guy with a fantastic finishing touch and a great nose for the net. He was an exceptional status player for a reason, and he's really starting to show it now. And I mean, you couldn't ask for a better situation for him too, right? Like he was with Saginaw last year throughout the Memorial Cup. I mean, he's got some very good teammates around him. You mentioned Epperson, there's Zane Perek as well. Like everything is just kind of lining up for him to take that next big step this season. And he has. I mean, he's taken a couple of big steps this season. I think he's exceeding everyone's expectations of him. And expectations were already pretty high. I mean, I don't know if he would have been considered a contender for first overall coming into the year. I don't know if many people would have done that. But at this point, when you look at what he's accomplished and, the speed at which his game is progressing, I think there is a realistic chance that if he keeps speeding up, he could catch up to Hagens, and that might be a really difficult conversation that some NHL teams have with their draft boards.
I just wanted to talk about a bit about the exceptional status thing, as well as some of the records he's on track for. I mean, I think he's on pace for 82 goals. The record in this century is John Tavares, 72 in 67 games when he was 16. Just all that kind of stuff, all the stuff following around him. I mean, he's had a deal with Upper Deck for a long time. He came out at the start of the season, or maybe it was someone in the Saginaw hockey operations, and said he wants first overall. And I'm someone who's a storyteller. I follow all that kind of stuff, and I'm keeping track of who he could pass and what record he could break. But I'm interested how much you factor that in and how much you can tune it out in your scouting process and just kind of look at what you're seeing in front of you.
It's part of the equation for sure. I mean, when you're scouting a player, you're taking all kinds of different points of data and trying to weigh them and apply them in ways that make sense. And I think there is something to be said about being able to handle the spotlight, right? Like the best of the best, like your Sidney Crosbys of the world. Like these are guys that were always in the spotlight and they just learned to live in it. And that became a huge advantage for them with Crosby as again, like when you talk about the Stanley Cup Finals that he's played in, like the Olympics in 2010, like this is a guy who is just so accustomed to pressure at a certain point that he was able to feed off of it in a kind of a way. It didn't, weaken him like it can with some other players. So the fact that Misa, has had the spotlight on him for so long, that he's had all these high expectations, and that he's been able to thrive through those, I think that's a very good sign because some players they aren't quite able to do that to the same degree.
Moving on to another OHL player in Porter Martone. Misa leads the CHL in goals so far, but Martone leads the CHL in points with 32 through 14 games, 16 goals, 16 assists. He's got 11 multi-point games, 2 games with a point, and just 1 game where he's been held scoreless, which is really relevant to me because I think the only kind of criticism I've seen about Martone in the 2 years he's played has been the consistency. So, he's been there game to game. Brampton's certainly a team with uh, you know, championship on their mind. How's Martone looked for you to start the season?
Oh man, I mean, fantastic. Like I don't know if you could say enough good things about Porter Martone. He's a very special and in some ways rare kind of player. Just the way that he's able to leave his mark on games, the number of different tools he has that are fantastic. I mean, we're talking about one of the best pure shooters in the draft, or in all of junior hockey, really. He's got fantastic hands. He's a very advanced and intelligent playmaker. He's got a lot of size and strength to work with that he can use to his advantage. His skating is maybe not at the top of this draft class, but it's more of a strength than a weakness, and there's still room for it to get better. There's just such an intriguing package there, just the way that he's able to impact the game in so many different ways. He's a guy who's very dangerous off the rush. He's very dangerous in the cycle. When it comes to his mental game too, there's a lot to like. I mean, he's a natural leader, tons of leadership traits. He's got this kind of big game persona to him too that I like. He's got this almost like cockiness that I think he walks the fine line with, but he makes it work. You don't want a guy who gets into trouble with it. You want a guy who can ride that high in a beneficial way. And I think he does that. He's the emotional leader for his team. He's been the emotional leader for Canada internationally. He's a guy who really loves the big moment and really thrives under pressure, as we've seen internationally as well. There's just so many different things about his game that are very, very appealing. And we're talking about, the race here for first overall. I mean, he's certainly a player that I could see teams prioritizing over someone like Hagens or someone like Misa, just because he's so different from them and what he brings. Now he's a winger, he's not a center. That might hold him back a little bit. But this type of player, you don't see it come around very often. They have a very unique kind of value if they hit at the NHL level. And I think that's going to be very, very appealing for a lot of teams who have high picks in this draft.
Uh, I think there's always going to be this narrative around late birthday players, that that they're a bit further along in their development. So I'm not
Yes.
really sure if this is the case with Martone. I'd like to ask you, like, is he just further along in his development or closer to his ceiling, whereas the guys below him might be a little bit more work but have, more room on the development road?
It's a very good question. I mean, Martone's in his third year in the OHL. And that gives him advantages over players that are only in their second year in the league. He's got more familiarity, he's had more access to the strength and conditioning and skills coaches at that level. I mean, there are advantages built in. What I usually try to do when it comes to these late birthday prospects, the guys who were born after September 15th, is I like to go back to the year prior and see kind of how they measure up. So, for example, Martone's 2006 birthday. How would I compare him to last year's draft class and some of the guys who got picked there? And I think with Martone, he was very special even before. He had a great year last year. He was crazy good at the U18 level internationally for Canada. I mean, this is a guy who's shown high end potential even before this season. So that's part of how you want to look at a player in this sort of situation. But also, I mean, you also have to give him credit for just how well he's played this year. He has taken his game up a level. You want to see a player that's always improving and progressing, not a player that's stagnating. And with Martone, we are still seeing more and more progress coming. And I don't think he's close to his ceiling yet either. I mean, when I watch him play, there's still moments and times where you might wish he would make a different play or maybe just do something a little bit differently. Or, I talked before about his skating. There are some areas where it could be cleaned up a little bit, but these are things that I think are still possible for him. I don't think these are, red flags about his game that can't be improved. I think they're all going to improve. So that's part of what makes him exciting. Not only is he a fantastic player right now and dominant right now at the OHL level, I still think he is getting better and better. And I still think he's actually got a long way to go before he reaches his ceiling.
The last name I wanted to mention as a potential challenger for James Hagens at first overall is Matthew Schaefer, the defenseman for the Erie Otters, the first overall pick in the OHL 2 years ago. Now he was listed in Bob McKenzie's list as the second overall prospect in the preliminary list, and he's yet to play very much this season. I think he's only played a handful of games. He had mononucleosis, but I mean, all the players we're talking about, this is often the case at the top of the draft, just exceptional, exceptional profiles. I mean, internationally, he's been a standout. I know, a lot of scouts are already just kind of drooling out at the profile, and I think he will absolutely be the guy based on the move they made to send Spencer Sova to Brantford, or sorry, to Brampton.
I mean, at this point, it seems pretty clear and undeniable consensus that Schaefer is the best defenseman in this draft class. I have a hard time seeing anyone even really coming close to him. You talked about his international success. If I remember correctly, it's three gold medals in a row, like U17, U18, and then the Halinka. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah, Schaefer is a one heck of a defenseman. His game reminds me a lot of someone like Miro Heiskanen, where it's just this like ruthless efficiency built through the skating and the puck skill and the sense. He's not like a Makar where he'll, do all this really high end, flashy offensive stuff. His game is a little bit more cerebral. It's more about, controlling the play and tilting the ice. But he does it so well. I mean, he was the best player at the Halinka, like by far in the whole tournament. I thought he was the best player, hands down. Just the way he was able to control the play there, and it's very projectable, right? Like he's got such an incredible skating ability, just fantastic edges, natural quickness, mobility, agility. Like he's kind of got everything. He understands the position very, very well. His positioning is fantastic. He picks really good opportunities to pinch up. He picks good opportunities to rush the puck. He handles the puck very well at speed. He can quarterback a power play if he needs to. He can kill penalties. There's just a lot about his game that looks like it's going to translate very, very well to the NHL level. And we talked about the race for first overall. I mean, right now, I wouldn't have Schaefer there. If I were to rank the guys we talked about, he'd probably be closer to like 4 or 5. But I mean, that could change if you come to the consensus or the strong opinion as a scout throughout the season that he has like 1D upside at the NHL level. If he could be a number one defenseman who's playing, 25, 26 minutes a night on a consistent basis, I mean, that might be more valuable than what you project someone like Misa or Hagens to be, right? Like, just because defensemen are such a premium at the NHL level, they play so much. And we've got someone like Schaefer who's, got great track record of success. He's got elite tools. He's got great like athleticism and conditioning, which should play very well at the NHL level. I mean, this is a guy who could be that 1D at the NHL level one day. And I don't think we've seen the best of him yet this season because of the mononucleosis, but I think his game is trending very much in the right direction. And he's going to be a guy that teams will have to really strongly consider in their discussions with the likes of Martone and Misa and Hagens and someone else we'll probably talk about soon.
I'd like to think that my understanding and my knowledge of the sport has grown in my time watching. And at the time I first saw Michael Schaefer, or sorry, at the time I first saw Matthew Schaefer, which is when he was with Halton Hurricanes at the U16 level. You hear you have a flashy, beautiful skating defender, and you're kind of just expecting, yeah, like you're talking about Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, and just oodles of points. And you know what? We didn't really see that in his rookie year. And as I kind of have grown and watched more hockey, I'm starting to learn to appreciate defensemen like Schaefer. And yeah, could you just talk a bit about when you have the skating he does, when he's always going to be able to close his gaps, he's always going to be able to catch up in straight line, and he's going to be able to move the puck very quickly. When your game is just built around consistency and minute eating and just starting the breakout and just being reliable and not so much, being the main driver of offense yourself. Like why is that at such a premium, and why are we at the point when we have a guy like Schaefer that's just so consistent and so well-rounded that it's so valuable that that he's in the conversation to go first overall over all these guys that are just racking up points.
Yeah, it just comes down to understanding like how the NHL game is played and what works in comparison to lower levels. I mean, in the rare example of someone like Cale Makar, you get a guy who can, make everyone else look on the ice look like they're going in slow motion, just with incredible explosiveness and agility. But for the most part, that's not really what is important. You don't necessarily want a defenseman who's even trying to go end to end all the time, right? It's more about that nuance of what you're using it for that sometimes you don't notice as much unless you're really looking for it. Like the ability to win a foot race, to a puck on a retrieval, escape forecheck pressure and skate it out of the zone. That is important stuff. And if you can do that every time you go for that retrieval, that's huge. Or you talk about like your gap control, or just your ability to angle forwards into the corner on the rush. I mean, those things are very, very important on a shift over shift basis. And, sometimes it's nice to see like the flashy end-to-end rush or something like that for the highlights, but that's not what's happening every game. It's not what's happening every shift. So you want to see a lot of the time, most of the time, an efficiency to how a player with high-end skating is using it. And I think that's something that Schaefer really understands. I mean, maybe in a different environment or a different team, he would have a green light to, go a little bit faster, a little bit harder, take more risks. Maybe that's not his game at all. He seems like he's someone who's a little bit more refined and reserved and cerebral with what he does. It's not about those big risks. It's more about like making the right play every single time. So I think he just has a very good understanding of what his strengths are with his skating and how to utilize them in a way that allows him to be a very dominant puck possession player now and will also serve him very, very well at the higher levels of the sport.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of the McKeen's Hockey Show. Make sure to tune in next week where Derek and I go over some potential risers from this year's class. And don't forget to check out mckeenshockey.com, where you can find analysis and reports on the CHL, AHL, and all leagues feeding the NHL.